door creaked open with a breath of stale lavender. Cora hadn't meant to enter. It pulled her. The air inside was frozen. A brush clung with long strands of hair. Then she saw it, a box on the windowsill. Trembling, she opened it. A child's bracelet. Her name, Cora, stitched in faded thread. She thought she came for a job, but what she found was a bracelet with her name stitched in faded thread, left in a room untouched since the woman died. And when she fell to her knees clutching it, the truth shattered her breath. This wasn't just the boy's home. It was her sister's. Stay with us, because what started as grief will become a story of love, family, and a bond broken by time, now finally stitched together again. 3 days after Silas nailed the sign to the gate, the wind carried with it the sound of wagon wheels, creaking, rattling, a rhythm that had grown unfamiliar to the lonely ranch. He stood on the porch, one hand resting on the railing, the other clutching a mug of lukewarm coffee he hadn't sipped in hours. The dust kicked up long before the coach came into view, a muted storm rolling low over the prairie. Then he saw it. The covered stagecoach creaked to a halt just beyond the gate. The driver hopped down and opened the back, revealing a single passenger. A woman. She stepped down carefully, holding a plain satchel in one hand, a folded bonnet in the other. Her dress was modest, faded blue cotton, mended at the elbows, and her boots were caked with the long road behind her. She looked around, eyes scanning the land, the porch, the weathered house beyond. Then her gaze settled on him. "You came from town?" Silas called out, his voice worn but steady. She nodded. "From Clifton. Took the last coach into Willow Hollow." Even from a distance, her voice had a calm to it, like still water after a storm. She read the sign on the gate, her expression unreadable, then started walking toward the porch. He studied her as she climbed the steps. She was younger than he'd expected, but her eyes held something older, wiser, worn. Not fragile, but not hard either. Composed, steady, the kind of strength that didn't make noise. "You looking for work?" he asked, watching her closely. "Yes," she replied simply. "I can cook, clean, and care for children." He hesitated, then stepped aside. "Then God help us both." Inside, the baby cried again, sharp, aching, as if he knew his mother wasn't the one holding him. Silas turned toward the stairs, but before he could move, the woman was already past him. "I can try," she said softly. He handed her the child, awkward and unsure. But the moment she cradled Caleb, his sobs slowed. Within seconds, silence. Silas stared, not just surprised, but stunned. "What's his name?" she asked, gently rocking. "Caleb," he said quietly. "Caleb Hartley." She nodded. "He's beautiful." "And you?" he asked. She looked up. Cora Mayfield." Something in his chest shifted, and for the first time in weeks, the house began to breathe. The Hartley ranch had once been filled with gentle sounds. Evelyn's laughter in the kitchen, the soft creak of the rocking chair by the fire, lullabies drifting upstairs like warmth itself. But since she passed, silence had taken root in every floorboard and corner. It wasn't peaceful silence. It was heavy, echoing, full of grief that clung to the windows like dust no one had the heart to wipe away. Until Cora. She didn't arrive with fanfare or declarations. She simply started doing. Each morning before the rooster even considered crowing, she was already up, warming milk for Caleb, humming quietly as she moved about the kitchen. The notes were soft, not quite a melody, but enough to stir something forgotten in the air. She didn't ask what needed doing, she just knew. Silas at first stayed out of her way. He wasn't sure what to make of her, this quiet woman who spoke less than she acted. But slowly, almost against his own will, he began to notice. The shawl she'd forgotten on the porch one evening had been neatly folded and left near the hearth the next day. Clean, warm, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke. She didn't mention it. He didn't ask. On another morning, she found a pitcher of water beside the porch swing, cool with mint leaves, already beating with condensation in the rising sun. She sipped it in silence, knowing without needing to be told who had left it. There was a kind of language in those small things. A folded towel, a smooth blanket, a quiet cup of tea left near the window where he liked to read. even if he never turned a page. They weren't grand gestures, but they chipped away at the heaviness that filled the home. Silas began watching from doorways, never close enough to interrupt. He saw how Cora moved through the house with careful grace, her footsteps light, her touch deliberate. She carried Caleb as if he were something precious, not a burden. She spoke to him softly, as though his babbles were words worth listening to. What surprised him most was how the boy responded. The colic eased. The long, pitiful cries grew shorter, then disappeared. The baby began to smile again, those gummy, sudden grins that made Silas feel like he could breathe without guilt. It wasn't fast, this transformation. But one day, Silas walked through the hallway and paused. There was light in the kitchen, real light, not just from the windows, but from something warmer, something alive. The house was breathing again. The door had always been closed. Cora passed it every morning and every night, at first out of respect, then from habit, and maybe, just maybe, from a quiet fear of what lingered behind it. It was Evelyn's room. No one had said it aloud, but the air around the brass doorknob always seemed to hum with memory, as though the space beyond it still breathed her name. But that night, the silence was different, heavy, expectant. Caleb had finally fallen asleep in her arms. The house was hushed under the weight of moonlight. Something pulled her, not loud or forceful, just a quiet nudge from inside the ribs. Her hand found the doorknob before her mind had decided. She turned it. The door opened with a sigh, and the scent of lavender and old cotton swept out like a ghost embracing her. The room had been left untouched. The bed was still made, the corners tucked with gentle precision. A shawl lay folded at the foot, and a lace curtain stirred in the breeze from a cracked window. Everything felt paused, as if time had tiptoed in and decided to wait. She stepped inside, hesitant, reverent. On a small table by the window sat a wooden jewelry box. The varnish was worn and faded, the latch loose. Her fingers hovered above it, trembling slightly. Something in her chest thudded like warning, but she opened it anyway. Inside was a child's bracelet, handmade. The edges were frayed, the colors faded pink and blue. She lifted it into her palm and stared. There, stitched in careful, crooked thread, was a name. Cora. Her breath caught. She stumbled backward, knees buckling, and sank onto the wooden floor. The bracelet clung to her hand like a lifeline, like a heartbeat long missing. Memories burst open. Two little girls in a crowded orphanage, huddled on a bunk bed, one whispering, "I'll never forget you," while threading this exact bracelet onto her sister's wrist with fingers far too small to promise forever. And then, the separation. Different foster homes, different last names. A lifetime of searching that always ended cold. She looked up slowly, scanning the room again. The perfume, the colors, the sketch above the dresser, a charcoal portrait of a smiling woman. Older, softer, but unmistakable. Evelyn. Tears blurred her vision. She cradled the bracelet to her chest and whispered through the hollow ache in her throat. "Evelyn, I found you. I just found you too late. But not too late for the child. Not too late for love. Not too late for home." It was late. The house had gone quiet again, save for the soft creak of the rocking chair upstairs and the occasional sigh of wind pressing against the windows. Silas had risen to fetch a glass of water when he paused at the nursery door, left slightly ajar. Inside, Cora sat with Caleb curled into her chest. The lamp was low, casting a pool of gold across the floor, but her voice, barely a whisper, reached him. "I had a sister once," she murmured, brushing Caleb's curls aside. "She made me a bracelet out of old cloth, stitched my name in it with crooked thread. Her name was Evelyn. They took us, sent us to different places. I never found her again." Silas froze. His fingers tightened around the stair rail, breath shallow. He hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but the ache in her voice rooted him in place. Later that night, he sat alone in his study. The fire had dimmed to soft embers. He stared at the roll-top desk Evelyn had once used, its compartment still filled with the remnants of a life half shared. Something compelled him to open the drawer he hadn't touched since the day she died. Inside, among faded recipes and dried lavender sprigs, lay a sealed envelope. The paper had yellowed at the edges. On the front, in Evelyn's gentle, slanted handwriting, were the words, "For Silas, only if she finds you." His hands shook as he opened it. "Silas, if by some grace she ever walks through our gate, please, please love her. Her name is Cora. She is my baby sister. She was taken from me too young. I searched and I prayed, but the world kept her far. If she finds you, let her stay. Let her be known. She is not a stranger. She is a promise I never got to keep." Tears blurred the ink as Silas folded the letter back, cradling it like something sacred. The next morning he found Cora in the kitchen, her back to him, humming softly as she boiled water for tea. She turned as he approached, her smile faint and tired. He said nothing. He simply placed the letter on the counter between them and stepped back. Cora stared at it, then lifted it with both hands. Her lips parted as she read the first line, then the second, and then she stopped breathing. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she clutched the letter to her chest. Silas didn't speak. He didn't need to. That morning no words passed between them, but something deeper did, a truth that belonged to all three of them now. The storm rolled in from the west just past noon, thick clouds tumbling over the hills like bruised cotton. The air was humid, heavy with the scent of wet soil and hay. Silas had warned the field workers to finish early, but Cora, ever diligent, stayed out longer than she should have, determined to finish tying the bundles of wheat near the far end of the property. The earth beneath her boots was slick with dew and uneven from a recent tilling. She didn't see the stone hidden under the stalks. Her foot caught. She fell hard. A sharp cry tore through her as her ankle twisted beneath her. Pain bloomed up her leg like fire, leaving her breathless on the ground. She tried to sit up, waving off the panic rising in her chest. "I'm fine," she whispered, though no one was around to hear it. The rain started minutes later, gentle at first, then turning fierce, slicing sideways like wind-driven needles. By the time Silas noticed her absence, the clouds had turned black and the field was nearly a blur of gray. He mounted his horse without a word and rode like a man possessed, his eyes scanning the soaked earth for any sign of her. His heart thudded louder than the thunder overhead. Then he saw her, a collapsed figure at the edge of the furrows, one hand shielding her eyes from the downpour, the other clutched around her ankle. "Cora!" he shouted. She tried to smile, to sit up. "I'm all right," she managed, teeth chattering. "No, you're not," he said, already off his horse and in the mud beside her. He lifted her gently, her wet dress clinging to his arms, her body shivering against his chest. She didn't protest. She didn't need to. The storm howled around them, but in that moment, something quiet passed between them, something neither had words for. Back at the house, Silas built a fire high and hot. He dried her hair with a towel, wrapped her in a blanket, and knelt beside her swollen ankle, hands steady but gentle as he unlaced her boot and began to wrap it. She drifted in and out of sleep that night, fevered and flushed. But every time her eyes opened, he was there, tending the fire, replacing the cool cloth on her brow, never once leaving her side. No words, no declarations, just presence, just care. By morning the storm had passed, but something between them had changed, quietly, permanently. What once had been obligation was now something far deeper. No longer a rancher and a hired woman, something closer to chosen. After the storm, something shifted between them, not with sudden declarations, but with soft gestures that spoke louder than words. One morning, Silas found a wool sweater draped over the saddle of his horse. It was hand-stitched, warm, and carried the faint scent of rosemary. Folded neatly into the collar was a small note in Cora's careful handwriting. "For when the wind bites at your neck." He didn't speak of it. But the next evening, as Cora finished washing up in the kitchen, she found a pair of finely made leather gloves resting on the edge of the hearth. Soft, weather-worn, the seams hand-stitched with quiet care. Inside one glove, tucked neatly, was a single wildflower. No note, just presence. It was how they spoke. Through kindness, through thought. Caleb, now toddling on unsteady feet, began calling Cora, "Mama." The first time it happened, Cora froze, spoon midair. Silas had looked up from his plate, eyes wide, but she didn't correct the boy. She only smiled, tears threatening behind her lashes, and continued feeding him, one spoonful of mashed sweet potato at a time. From then on, the name stuck, and Silas never questioned it. Evening meals changed too. What used to be silent and sparse became slow and shared. They ate at the same table now. Cora always prepared just enough for three, with fresh herbs and warm bread, and a little extra of whatever Caleb liked best. Silas began sharing stories, small ones, about the time a cow had wandered into the parlor during a thunderstorm, about how Evelyn once tried to learn to bake and nearly burned down the kitchen. Cora laughed, and it didn't feel like a betrayal. Sometimes they sat together after supper, rocking gently in silence as Caleb played on the rug. No one rushed. No one filled the space with unnecessary noise. These were the evenings that stitched something whole again, slowly, delicately. Not a romance declared with flowers or promises, but something quieter, something earned, something real. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows, casting long slants of gold across the wooden floor. Cora found Silas kneeling in front of the hearth, a chisel in one hand, wood shavings scattered around him like fresh snow. He didn't say a word as she approached, just looked up, eyes soft, then turned back to his work. She watched in silence, heart thudding, as his steady hands etched letters into the wood above the fireplace. The strokes were imperfect but deliberate, like someone tracing memory into matter. Evelyn, Cora, Silas, Caleb. He paused after the last name, brushing away the shavings with the edge of his sleeve. Then below them all, he carved one final phrase in smaller, careful lettering. A home chosen, not inherited. Cora stepped forward, kneeling beside him. She reached out and traced her fingers gently over the names, each groove holding more than just identity. It held belonging, forgiveness, and a future built together. Tears stung her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Not here, not in this moment. There was no erasing of the past in those carvings. No one was replaced. No name overshadowed another. Each stood with quiet dignity. Evelyn, the memory; Cora, the healing; Silas, the anchor; and Caleb, the beginning. For the first time, the hearth wasn't just a place to warm their hands. It was the heart of their story. When Silas stood, he didn't offer a grand speech. He simply rested a hand on her shoulder and whispered, "We did this, all of us." Cora nodded, her hand still resting on the freshly carved wood. Her voice trembled when she replied, "And we'll keep doing it, together." From that day forward, the names above the fire reminded them of what they had lost, and more importantly, what they had chosen to build in its place. A family, not by blood, not by obligation, but by love freely given and gently returned. Willow Hollow's Saturday market was always a swirl of color and chatter. Barrels of apples stacked high, fresh bread steaming on linen cloth, and townsfolk trading gossip as often as goods. It wasn't the kind of place that welcomed change easily. People noticed everything, especially the unfamiliar. So when Cora walked through the main street with little Caleb toddling beside her, heads turned. She didn't flinch. She wore her simple blue dress, sleeves rolled to the elbows, hair tied back neatly. One hand held her market basket. The other held Caleb's tiny fingers, sticky with apple juice and delight. "Mama, look! Red one!" Caleb squealed, pointing excitedly at a pile of tomatoes. Cora laughed, a full, easy sound, and crouched down beside him. "Yes, baby, that one's almost bigger than your whole head." An older woman behind a vegetable stall tilted her head curiously. "He's got your eyes," she said kindly, offering a smile. "Yours, is he?" Cora stood, brushing dust from her hem. Her eyes didn't falter. "Not born from me," she said gently, "but mine in every way that matters." There was a pause. Then the woman nodded once, the kind of nod that meant more than words. "That's what counts," she said, handing Caleb a small plum for free. "Hold on tight to him." The exchange was simple, but the ripple it created spread quickly through the square. People smiled a little more openly as Cora passed. One man tipped his hat. Another woman offered her a deal on fresh lavender. Someone whispered, "That's Hartley's boy's new mama." She didn't correct them, because what was there to correct? She had earned that name not through blood, but through lullabies, fevers soothed, scraped knees kissed, and countless moments of showing up without question. Caleb didn't know the difference between real and not real. He only knew she was the one who stayed. As they walked back toward the wagon, the sun high and golden behind them, Cora looked down at her son, yes, her son, and smiled. Let them talk. Let them watch. Because for the first time in her life, Cora didn't just belong to a place, she belonged to someone, and that someone called her Mama. The dishes had been cleared, the hearth glowed with soft amber light, and Caleb's gentle breathing echoed from the nursery upstairs. Outside, the wind rustled the dry grass across the prairie, but inside the house, there was only stillness, the good kind, the kind built slowly, with trust and time. Cora sat at the table, her fingers laced around a half-empty teacup. Silas stood by the window, arms folded, watching the horizon fade into shadows. Neither of them rushed to fill the silence. They had learned not to fear it. After a long moment, Cora spoke. Her voice was quiet but certain. I'm not here just because of Evelyn. Silas turned slowly. I'm here because I choose to be. I choose you, and I choose Caleb. Her words hung in the air, fragile and fierce all at once. She didn't flinch, didn't look away. Her eyes shimmered, not with hesitation, but with honesty. Silas walked over, pulled out the chair beside her, and sat. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached for her hand. Rough fingers brushed against hers, calloused and warm. Then he said just above a whisper, loving you doesn't mean forgetting her. It means living forward, with love. Cora's breath caught. Her lips trembled, and she looked down at their joined hands. His thumb moved gently across her knuckles, grounding her. It wasn't a grand declaration. It wasn't a proposal, but it was everything. A door gently opened between past and present, not to erase what had been, but to honor it by building something new. Cora leaned into him just slightly, resting her head against his shoulder. He turned and pressed a soft kiss to her hair, his eyes closed. There in the glow of the firelight, with Evelyn's memory surrounding them, not as a shadow but as a bridge, they sat. Two people not saved by love, but steadied by it. She had not come to replace anyone. He had not needed her to. But together they had chosen something neither of them expected. Family. Not by blood, not by obligation, but by love, freely given, and finally fully received. In today's fast-moving world, we sometimes forget the quiet power of commitment, of choosing to stay, to love, and to heal, one small act at a time. This story isn't just about Silas or Cora. It's about all of us who've lost someone and still dared to open our hearts again. Maybe you've loved and lost. Maybe you're raising a grandchild. Maybe you found a friend who became more like family than blood ever could. That's what this story reminds us. Love isn't always born, it's built. And home isn't always inherited, it's chosen. In modern times, these truths matter more than ever. When traditional families shift and new ones form, what defines family becomes something far deeper than genetics. It becomes presence, care, grace. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever found family where you least expected it? Do you think Evelyn would have wanted Silas and Cora to become something more? What name would you carve into your own hearth? Let's talk about it together. Thank you for joining us here on The West That Never Left, where stories of the old frontier still speak to hearts today. If this tale meant something to you, please like the video, subscribe for more soulful Western stories, and share it with someone you love. Because the West didn't leave us, and neither did the values we still carry. Quiet love, second chances, and family that holds on. We'll see you in the next story.